Welcome everyone to our Spring May 2022 open house. My name is Elizabeth Papadopoulos. I'm the director of the Institute of Holistic Nutrition. It's an honor and joy to be here with all of you today. Thank you for joining us. And we'd like to introduce our incredible instructor, Petra Sovcov. Petra is a clinical herbal therapist and a graduate of Dominion Herbal College. She is the owner of Healing House Natural Wellness Center and also works at the Finlandia Health Center and Naturopathic. And we're going to update that, no problem. So Petra is an active member of Herbalists Without Borders International, and she is a primary contributor for Home Herbalist magazine. Petra is very passionate about promoting an individual's healing path and enjoys enriching a person's core wellness with the use of herbs and nutrition. She believes that health and healing should not be something afforded solely to those with the financial means to help them. However, to give them the knowledge and wisdom so they can take self-responsibility for their own healing. And this is a basic human right. So apart from her busy clinical practice and her teaching, she is an avid gardener. She has her very own sustainable small-scale food production that she'll let you know about today. She enjoys teaching out of her gardens at Healing House and finds great meaning in sharing the message of sustainability with others. And let's welcome Petra, who teaches nutrition in the environment and herbal medicine at the Institute of Holistic Nutrition's Vancouver campus and the Pacific Time Zone online campus. Welcome, Petra.
Hello, Elizabeth. It's nice to actually meet you in person.
It really is. It totally is. So nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. So let me get this ready. Can I have share screen? Oh, I already got share screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. We'll just do this the way we do it when we teach. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to see. Well, I guess I can't see you all. To meet you all. We're going to be talking about endocrine disrupting chemicals. We need to update the introduction. That's a couple years old now. I will definitely send that out. So here's a small introduction. There we go. I'm originally from Seattle. I studied at Dominion Herbal College. I'm a doctor of natural medicine, registered with the Examining Board of Natural Medicine Practitioners of Canada. I do own Healing House Natural Wellness Center, and I serve on the board of directors for Herbalists Without Borders. I'm their chair, and I teach at IHN. I'm a crazy plant lady, and I am a huge fan of Outlander. So there we go. So here's some things we're going to talk about today. Endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs, are a major issue in our modern lifestyle. And we talk about it a lot, well, more than a lot, in nutrition and the environment. But in order for you to really understand EDCs, you need to know a little bit about your endocrine system, what it is, what it does. Why should we care that there's EDCs in our food, water, air, personal care products, dental products, baby products, female care products, medications, and so forth? Why should we care? In order to know why, we need to know how our endocrine system works. We're going to talk about what EDCs are. We're going to get to know about a certain type of EDCs. Generally, we're going to talk about agricultural EDCs because it is way too broad a topic for me to discuss all of them. So we're just going to stick to agriculture since we are in a nutrition program, and that's the first thing that we can readily and quickly control is EDCs through what we're eating. We're going to know about how they impact the body, how they get in there, how they cause problems. And I'm going to introduce you to some of the worst offenders. So some of the subcategories or the families of some of these endocrine disrupting chemicals. We're going to also talk about a concept called toxic load. This is the load of toxic chemicals that leads to a health crisis. This is a really important concept to know. And then we're also going to talk about how an individual can possibly help themselves. There are things that you can do. There's things that you can do right after this presentation, and I'm going to tell you what they are. We're going to talk about dietary, herbal, and supplemental allies to help with long-term exposures and to mitigate the damage from some endocrine disrupting chemicals as well. I do go a little bit interactive with this, so I might be asking you guys questions. So feel free to respond. I don't think we can take you off mute. My classes are super animated, super responsive. So I'm constantly asking my students questions. So talking to myself for an hour and a half feels a little strange, but meet your endocrine system. This is your system that controls your hormones. And why should we care about hormones? Well, hormones are the chemicals that tell your body how to function. This is what makes your body run. And your endocrine system is kind of married to your nervous system. They like to go hand in hand. So the endocrine system is a series of glands that produce and secrete hormones that the body uses for almost all of its cellular metabolic functions. They tell us things like, how fast should my heart beat today? How am I going to digest this piece of cucumber? What mood am I in today? Am I going to have issues with reproductive health? Controlling blood sugar. Hormones do all these things. The endocrine system controls body activities by releasing mediators called hormones. And a hormone is a molecule that is released in one part of the body but regulates the activity of cells in another part of the body. For example, your thyroid. Your thyroid could be like, let's adjust the body temperature. And it sends a hormone message, and then your body temperature adjusts. Let's say you might start sweating, or we need to speed up the heart rate. Let's go. So although it's coming from an endocrine organ or from a hormone, it's going to different parts of the body. So it's an amazing system. So we've got these things called endocrine glands, and we're going to talk about three of the main drivers. So this is the hypothalamus, pituitary, and thyroid, also known as the HPT axis. These are the three big guys that drive the rest of the system. So the body contains two kinds of glands. These are exocrine and endocrine glands. Exocrine glands secrete their hormones into ducts that carry the secretions into body cavities and onto the surface of an organ. And endocrine glands are a bit different. They secrete their hormones into the interstitial fluid. So we have interstitial fluid throughout the whole body, surrounding the secretory cells rather than into ducts. Okay, so some of them are direct, some of them are indirect, and it's kind of like your little tube system, and it goes where it needs to go. The endocrine glands include the pituitary, thyroid, parathyroid, and pineal glands. In addition, several organs and tissues are also classified as endocrine glands because they contain cells that secrete hormones. These include things like our hypothalamus, our thymus, our pancreas, our adrenal glands, our ovaries, testes, and the placenta in pregnant women. Taken together, all endocrine glands and hormone-secreting cells constitute as the endocrine system. So it's a very important system. It mitigates our body health. It helps us maintain homeostasis. This is the big one, guys, okay? So I'm not going to get too into it, but they're divided into two broad classes, those that are soluble in lipids and those that are soluble in water. Lipid-soluble hormones include your steroid hormones, your thyroid hormones, your nitric oxide, and all the other hormones. And some water-soluble hormones include amine hormones and proteins and peptides. So it's kind of like saying, I like to say like brain and thyroid, lipid, digestive, water, okay? Most water-soluble hormone molecules circulate in the water, blood plasma, and are termed free form, meaning they flow throughout the body. But most lipid-soluble hormone molecules are bound to transport protein. And that's where a lot of the trouble comes from when we talk about endocrine disrupting chemicals. So what happens, or generally EDCs, a lot of the bad ones are fat soluble. And I'm going to talk to you why that's so important to know in just a little bit. Although a given hormone travels through the body and the blood, it may affect only specific target cells. Hormones, like our neurotransmitters, influence their target cells by chemically binding to specific protein receptors. And it's these EDCs that mimic hormones, but yet use the same receptors as our body's hormones, and our bodies can't tell the difference. And this is where the trouble comes from. So only the target cells for a given hormone have receptors that bind and recognize that hormone. It's a lock and key. Okay? For example, thyroid stimulating hormone binds to receptors on cells of the thyroid gland, but it does not bind to cells of the ovaries because ovarian cells don't have the receptors. Okay? Receptors, like other cellular proteins, are constantly being synthesized and broken down. Generally, a target cell has 2,000 to 100,000 receptors for a particular hormone. That gives us a big pathway for interruption throughout the entirety of our body when we're talking about these chemicals. So a little bit of information. As I said earlier, the way that these EDCs get into our body is they mimic hormones. Our body is incredibly, incredibly smart. It will constantly try till your last dying breath to maintain homeostasis, to maintain health. Your and my natural point of existence, natural being, is health, which is the fantastic thing. So when we talk about this lock and key, your body is sending these hormones constantly, and certain hormones connect to certain receptors, okay? And as I said earlier, EDCs can be mistaken by our bodies as hormones and cross into our organs, our cells, and even our DNA. And this is very important because in our DNA, we have things called SNPs, and these SNPs are little switches. They go on and off. These are the factors that you and me have control over that we can then mitigate SNP switches on and off through our habits, okay? EDCs are well known to be inflammatory and toxic. Why do we care about inflammation? Chronic inflammation or inflammation is your body's natural reaction to injury, okay? And that's not me, that's the medical dictionary. So when you have chronic inflammation always leads to disease unless mitigated. So if your inflammation is coming from a chronic chemical injury, we're going to have endocrine and metabolic diseases. A global view, endocrine and metabolic diseases are already at a global epidemic. Did you know only 1 in 8 people in North America do not have a metabolic or endocrine-based disease? That's from the World Health Organization. That's scary, in my opinion. That's saying, holy smokes, something is wrong here, okay? If we don't change by 2030, it is estimated that endocrine and metabolic diseases will be the primary form of disease, more than cancer and cardiovascular disease. Right now, the top 2 diseases are cardiovascular and then cancer. So where do they come from and what do they do? Before we get into that, this is a lead into the next portion. Now, because we are going to be talking about agricultural EDCs in the form of herbicides and pesticides, a lot of my classes, I start with a quote to get people going and thinking. This is the quote from my second class. So the time has come to reclaim the stolen harvest and celebrate the growing and giving of good food as the highest gift and the most revolutionary act. And this is from Vandava Shiva. Why in the world is all of a sudden giving good, clean food a revolutionary act? What do you guys think? Why would that be? I can't see the grid, so, but I'll look, but type your opinion. I want to know. It's because so much of our modern food is completely saturated with dangerous chemicals. And we want to know why. How did we get to this point? Why is it that so many of our food, including many of our potential organic foods and our clean farms and our soil, why are they soaked suddenly with these toxic chemicals? So we need to understand a little bit of history of agricultural food production. And if we have any of my students here, I know some of them signed up, they'll recognize the next couple slides from class number 2. So before we got into modern agriculture, we used natural fertilizers and manure for soil fertility. We didn't need chemical-based fertilizers. We still don't need, in my opinion, chemical-based fertilizers. But and we worked for centuries with the natural systems and out of necessity. Climate patterns determine crop outcomes. Now, that is a challenging thing to consider because when there were bad crops, people starved, okay? Population increased exponentially in the 19th century and food supplies also needed to increase, okay? In 1825, the world population finally reached 1 billion people. And calorie consumption increased, consumption of animal protein and cereal consumption decreased. You need a lot more land and a lot more resources to eat animal proteins than you need for plants. Now, I'm not here to try to make anybody vegan or vegetarian. It's just a fact. You need to grow the feed, you need to have the land, you need to have the water, and so forth. And most crops in North America are actually grown to feed the animal industry. So by the 1960s, I want to introduce you to something, well, we're not there yet, but by the 1960s, industrial methods of agriculture were well established. So on the out were family farms, on the out were restorative farming practices, and chemical inputs were brought in. And each time chemical inputs kind of increased after World Wars. Well, that's kind of strange. World War I and World War II were some of the biggest booms for agricultural herbicides and pesticides. Mechanized farming methods became the norm. So did the rise in factory farm. And the focus, because of our population boom, turned to increase in yield with significant hidden costs. We're going to talk about those hidden costs. By the late 1960s, we turned to something called the Green Revolution. I like to call this revolution great idea, bad practice. This was a planned international effort to eliminate hunger globally. So Western nations promoted high-yielding varieties of crops to developing nations, and they needed irrigation, fertilizer, pesticides, and machination. Okay, what do you generally not find a lot of in developing countries? Increased food production in some place, but not all, helped keep hunger at bay, but did not eliminate famine and malnutrition, and led to increased costs of production and negative environmental impacts. And I'm going to tell you why. The Green Revolution brought in a whole bunch of non-native plant varieties into climates where they had, in my opinion, no business growing, used herbicides and pesticides, got indigenous farmers into the chemical loop and the seed monopoly, and people struggled because it's kind of like, as I like to tell my students when I'm teaching this, it's kind of like trying to start a cucumber farm in the Sahara Desert. It's got no business growing there. So instead of looking at native plant varieties, native cereal crops, heirloom things that have been growing in these environments for thousands of years, we thought, okay, corn, cereal, wheat, rice, herbicides, pesticides, irrigation, big farming, blah. And that was the 1960s Green Revolution. This introduced, in my opinion, a lot of chemicals on a global scale and really started the chemical input rat race. Okay, so let's talk about pesticides. All right. Since this is kind of where we're going today with EDCs. So what is a pesticide? It's a chemical substance used to attract, seduce, or kill, destroy pests. Pests, not pets, not fluffy, not sparky, pests. These pesticides generally come from the residue of world wars. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true, okay? After World War II, excess chemical warfare was introduced into agriculture. After World War II, there was an excess amount of chemicals used for war where the formulations were changed or diluted in order to use them on crops. The same corporations that make pesticides were now behind napalm and Agent Orange. By the mid-60s, 400 million pounds of agricultural pesticide was used. 5.6 billion pounds of pesticides are used annually worldwide. And this is a comment that's about 5 years old now, 6 years old. So I'm not sure what it is now. Many pesticides have been banned in the US and Canada, but despite this, the US exports millions of pounds, and Canada, of banned pesticides, including DDT, sends it to other nations, which use it to grow crops and then sell it back to us. Enjoy your DDT. Okay, so some of the risks associated with pesticides. Most are deliberately released into the environment and are designed to be toxic to pests. You're thinking, why should I care? I'm not a pest. I'm not a weevil. I'm not an aphid. I'm not a weed. I'm going to tell you. People are generally unaware of exposure to pesticides. If you're local, you've heard about the commentary from the spray that's going to happen from Hope, I think, all the way to, from Hope all the way to Squamish, where the farming industry wants to spray glyphosate. But they're not releasing how much, where, and when. They refuse to release it to the public. The possible health and environmental impacts may be delayed, sometimes by decades, and some people, especially children, may be particularly susceptible. And exposure to multiple pesticides, not tested. So I'm Joe Schmo. I eat a standard Western diet. Gonna have my apples, my strawberries, my squash, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I've got herbicides and pesticides in my food. I've got it in my water. I've got it in my daily care products. I've got it in a multitude of things. There's no real studies to tell me what happens when I combine all these things and use them day in, day out, over days, weeks, months, years, decades, lifetimes. See where I'm going here? So information on the number of Canadians poisoned by exposure to pesticides is extremely difficult to uncover. The federal government doesn't keep track of such data, and poisonings are not considered a reportable event. So provincial healthcare systems do not consistently report or systematically monitor them. Sorry. So let's talk about some of the common offenders. These are some very, very common chemicals used in agriculture. They're also endocrine disrupting chemicals. They're also metabolic disrupting chemicals. They're also nervous system disrupting chemicals. And these are the classes. So these are the main classes, and then the chemicals kind of fall into the classes. So I'll give you just a brief commentary about some of these. I do have information from toxicology reports, which I can give you a little bit more of if you want it. So first one, we can visit good old-fashioned organochlorines. This is the class that DDT comes from. These disrupt the nervous system, lead to liver damage, kidney damage, and thyroid damage. Right now, one of the most common endocrine or metabolic diseases on the rise is non-alcoholic fatty liver, seen in children as young as 2 years old. Phenoxy acid herbicides, these are used to directly impact hormones of weeds. They're considered selective herbicides. They're also connected with soft tissue carcinomas, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and commonly used in forestry. And in BC, forestry is a huge, huge, huge industry. Okay. Carbamates, this is a common insecticide, generally causes nausea, vomiting, headache, vertigo, skin rashes, lesions. Looking more into it, we use it commonly in agriculture, but when I started looking at clinical studies and toxicology reports, they all kind of say the same thing. Not enough known, not enough studied about the impacts on humans. Organophosphates are another one. These target insects and mammals. They can create confusion, anxiety, depression, change in mood and personality. They're tied to adrenal, thyroid, and pancreatic tumors. And again, when I started looking for toxicology reports and clinical studies, not enough known. Long-term studies not studied on, long-term effects not studied on humans. This is also where glyphosate comes from. This is the class of glyphosate. And then the other one I always want to talk about is neonicotinoids. This is a super common one. You can probably find it in your house if you have a bug spray or certain common household cleaning products, or if you garden and use certain companies. I won't mention it, but it's a very common type of herbicide and pesticide. It's commonly known as the bee killer. So this is the one that greatly impacts bees, their ability to reproduce, their nervous system. It's been shown to have a connection with malformations of the developing heart and brain, has been shown to potentially have connections with autism spectrum disorder, and commonly used in your home and my home and many other people's homes, not knowing, for home products, stuff for pets, and in your garden. Sorry. So where are they hiding? There's a lot of places. Now, I'm just going to talk to you about some of the, again, agricultural EDCs, but I've listed some of the things where you might find other ones. So food sprayed during growth, shipping, and storage, saturated plant cells. Produce in a supermarket, standard stuff is oftentimes holding 9 or more pesticides. In insect sprays, mothballs, dry cleaners, exterminators, home foundations to keep pests out, fabrics, garden products, golf courses, parks, public lawns, roadsides, railway sides, aerial sprays of cities for mosquitoes and other pests, wood preservatives, home paints and varnishes, public institutions, especially during a pandemic, hotels, schools, nursing homes, hospitals, restaurants, personal care products. I teach an entire section on personal care products. I will give you homework. I'm going to show you how to find your own EDCs in your personal care products. Cookware, again, huge place where EDCs hide. Drinking water, that's another one. Big place where EDCs hide. Medications, packaged foods, another big one. Polluted air and soil, big one. And modern agricultural products. Holy smokes. That's a lot. It's really depressing. My students have called this class the most depressing class at IHN. But I'll do the same thing for you that I do for them, and that is I will give you tools and information so that you can make informed decisions to mitigate your toxic load and to maybe make some more informed decisions about what you're feeding yourself, what you're putting on your body every day, your personal care products, and so forth. But there's a concept here that I want to explore with you, and that's the concept of toxic load. We're also going to talk about some of the endocrine and metabolic diseases and environmental exposure. So what is the toxic load? We also talk about it as the rain barrel effect. And you can look at it this way. And this is the load that your body can withstand before having a health crisis, okay? So toxic load refers to the harmful chemicals that accumulate in the body through exposure to things such as air and water pollutants, numerous categories of food additives, chemicals and personal care products and household cleaners, medications, plastics, and other environmental exposures such as herbicides and pesticides. The easiest thing that you can control, however, is diet and lifestyle factors. You, me, your future clients. This is the best way to start. And since we're already talking about a nutritional program, what a relief. You can have a huge and immediate impact, positive impact on people's lives by simply understanding where these chemicals are hiding, what they are, how to identify them, how to get rid of them, how to mitigate harm to yourself and others. So toxic load, another thing we need to talk about is toxic load is not overnight. It's not, I ate an apple and now I've got liver disease. It's not about that. It's about the fact that our lifestyles are so incredibly polluted that we need to now pay attention and kind of police, and it's ridiculous that we have to do this, but police our habits. Take the time to read your labels. Take the time to know what these chemicals are, where they are. be able to identify them. Okay, so toxic load is about the toxic load from birth, from start to health crisis. Okay, it's not just eating something wrong one day. So it's the load of toxic chemicals, EDCs, MDCs in your daily food, water, habits, personal care products, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, till eventually your body gets to a place of disease. And of course, this doesn't happen to everybody, but it happens to enough people to make this a global issue. So how do they impact the body? Why should we care? People may be exposed to endocrine disruptors through food and beverages, pesticides, and cosmetics. In essence, your contact with these chemicals may occur through diet, air, skin, and water. Speaking of water, it's always a good idea, if you want to be a nuisance and maybe scare yourself a little bit, but I watch the water reports. They can tell you a lot about what's going on in your community. They can tell you a lot about what's going on environmentally in your area. Now, for example, if your water comes from a certain watershed, it's a beautiful forested watershed, and then they spray it with glyphosate, that glyphosate is going to come down, the rain's going to wash it on down, put it through the soil, into the groundwater, and into your drinking water. It's not just about the pests, okay? It's not just about the short term. In our Earth's environment, we are all related, okay? So what we do to the Earth, we do to ourselves. Even low doses of endocrine disrupting chemicals may be unsafe. Studies are starting to reveal this. The body's normal endocrine functioning involves very small changes in hormone levels. So when our body is telling our stomach to digest food, when our body is telling us to change our heart rate, these are all tiny, small, little micro hormonal changes. Okay, yet we know even these small changes can cause significant developmental and biological effects. This observation leads scientists to think that endocrine disrupting chemical exposure, even at low amounts, can alter the body's sensitive system and lead to health problems. The scary thing is, like, we're now seeing EDCs in umbilical cord blood. We're seeing EDCs in placental blood and placental tissues. So it's getting everywhere. So how does the mimic work? I've said a few times that it mimics hormones, hormone receptors. It's a lock and key system. Okay, so this is from the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. This is the link below. This is not my graphic, so I'm giving them full credit. Here's your normal hormones. They're all shaped like diamonds. And here's your hormone receptors, okay, lock and key. So here's your key, here's the lock. It's going to then pass those hormones into the cell and create a cell response. Here's your mimic. Here is your EDC, okay? It's going to mimic a hormone, commonly estrogen, testosterone. These are some of the ones that we talk about a lot. It is going to present itself as estrogen. Your body's going to say, oh, yummy, yummy, yummy. It's going to pass into the cell. It's going to create an inflammatory cellular response. Okay, or estrogen excess, which leads to everything from potentially breast cancer to all kinds of tumors. We have throughout our society all kinds of, I'm sure you've heard estrogen dominant cancer. I'm sure you've heard that term. We didn't just all of a sudden start producing estrogens. We're not just like, Tuesday, guess I gotta raise that estrogen. No, we're getting bombarded with chemicals that our body thinks are estrogens. We call them xenoestrogens, which are highly inflammatory and toxic. Or some of these EDCs can block the hormone exchange, leading to no cellular response. Okay, so very simple way of understanding how that works. So what are the health risks? Well, we've got acute and chronic health risks. Okay, so nausea, cramps, these are acute. Respiratory problems, headaches, memory loss, dizziness, nosebleeds, sore throats, death, Sorry. This is more like acute, exacerbated amount of pesticides. This is not going to be like eating 3 normal apples at the grocery store. You're not going to encounter that. This is more like, wow, a plane just flew overhead and I just got dumped with pesticides, that kind of situation. Okay, but we want to pay attention to these ones, those chronic effects that appear from that toxic load. So increased risk of cancer, lymphoma, leukemia, breast cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, all these things. Neurological impairments, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's. So a lot of these chemicals are designed to attack a pest's endocrine system, their nervous system, okay? They're living things, so are we. Developmental effects, some of them are teratogenic, which means they can cause birth defects or spontaneous abortions. Endocrine disrupting, so again, mimic hormones, bind to receptor sites, stimulate cancer growth, low birth rates, low sperm count, infertility, abnormalities in sex development, and birth defects. Liver damage, again, I said this earlier, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease now being seen in children young as 2 years old, and vast depression of the immune system. So what can we do to protect ourselves? What can we do? There's a few things that we can do. We've got individual actions and we've got the bottom line. So I tell my students this all the time. Every time you make a purchase, you are voting with your dollar. And companies that produce these chemicals or don't produce these chemicals want your dollar, okay? Also consider, I like to say, morals of health. For you as a possible future nutritionist, for you as a possible future individual who's going to be helping people to make hard decisions, you're going to need to know what your morals of health are. They're going to be different for everybody. There's no right or wrong, okay? So match your actions to your morals of health. Support the companies that match your morals. Don't buy from the companies that don't match your morals. Read your labels. It's a pain in the batoogie the first couple times through. I can tell you a story. Not even a few years ago. A couple decades back, I went through a major health crisis, and it was endocrine based. And in this major health crisis, I needed to all of a sudden vastly change my diet because I was eating poo-poo caca, standard Western diet. And I needed to now get rid of gluten, get rid of dairy, get rid of processed foods, get rid of sugars. I needed to go and read my labels. And I went to the grocery store and I tried to do all the things my naturopathic physician gave me at the time. And I found the produce aisle. I sat on the floor like a weirdo and I cried. And I called my boyfriend at the time. So I can't do this. This is too hard because everything had BS ingredients in it. I couldn't find anything that I could eat. It was nuts. Then I calmed down. I was like, okay, let's do this again. And started refining my searches and fine tuning and not hyperventilating. But bottom line, read your labels. It's overwhelming to start with, but you'll find those companies that make clean, healthy food products. And then you'll also live at the organic section and at the organic produce section. But it can be done. Also eating local, seasonal, organic, or biodynamic. So eating local, eating within 100 kilometers, 100 miles of yourself leads to big changes because foods that are grown locally or seasonally, you're going to find a lot more options for clean foods. Okay. Also, they're going to be much more nutritionally dense, especially if you want to eat seasonally. Organic and biodynamic, these will never have herbicides or pesticides sprayed on them. So you can be pretty safe. I like to call biodynamic more organic than organic. I'm not going to get into what biodynamic is. Take my class. I will preach at you for at least 2 hours about biodynamic agriculture. I promise. You'll be so sick of it. But it's kind of like the old-fashioned way of doing things. All right. So what can we do individually as well? Speak out in our community. Let people know when you hear about things when it comes to EDCs or herbicides, pesticides being sprayed in your community. Let people know. Make sure people understand what's going on. Lead by action, not by discord. This is an opinion statement. So leading by action, meaning lead through what you do with your life. People will become inspired on their own by seeing what you do, seeing your health, seeing your glowing personality, more than standing on a soapbox in the corner and yelling at people. You're killing yourselves. Well, maybe not that dramatic. You're going to get sick, okay? Pay attention to your local government's actions and don't be afraid to be a well-informed nuisance. So if you hear that they're spraying somewhere and they're not releasing it publicly or want to hold back, go ahead and be a little bit of a nuisance. Write a letter. Enough people get on the action bandwagon, they listen. So why am I including this in a talk on EDCs? Because I include this in my class. I like to give people the tools, at least the basic tools, to make them feel in power and in control, because you are. You're in power, you are in control of what you put in your body and what happens to you and around you. So let's talk about the cycle of removal and healing. So these things are in so many products, so many fruits and vegetables, so many personal care things, Tampax, pads, you name it, like they're in everything. So what do? Well, we've got the cycle of removal and healing. First and foremost, dietary intervention. For yourself, for your future clients, look at what they're eating. Not just, I ate canned tomato soup, but which one did you eat? Right? With my own clients, we do a dietary intervention. Like I go to their house and we fine tune and inspect their pantry. It leads to many discussions, sometimes tears. But dietary intervention is the biggest immediate impact item you can have when it comes to endocrine disrupting chemicals, metabolic disrupting chemicals, toxins in general. So dietary intervention, preventing exposure, knowing where they're coming from in your daily life. Are you using a shampoo and conditioner that has phthalates in it? Are you using skincare products that have known endocrine disruptors in them? Are you using or eating any number of things? Okay, get rid of what you can. Okay, prevent further exposure. Then you want to target the pathways. If we were in class, I'd be giving you the big spiel about all the pathways, our body pathways in which we receive toxins, EDCs, MDCs. So figure out which of your pathways, your metabolic pathways or your the pathways in which you're bringing them in, are you getting the most from? And target that first. So is it because you're eating a lot of junk? Is it because of your job? Are you getting it through the air, through your water, through your medications, through any number of things? Figure out which one is the biggest impact and try to mitigate that first, because starting from looking at the whole picture, it's going to be overwhelming. It's going to be scary. You might not know what to do. Okay. Next one, increase detox. When you open up all channels of elimination in your body, you can more easily get rid of these chemicals. Now, the poopy thing is, most of these chemicals are fat soluble. Fat soluble means they get stored in fat and tissue in your body, allowing them to become much more, what's the word I'm looking for? Concentrated in the body over time. So we want to look at helpers, which I'm going to talk about shortly, herbal, supplemental, dietary lifestyle that can help get rid of some of these fat soluble things, help the body to get rid of it naturally. Okay, and then feed the microbiome. So many of these chemicals, herbicides, and pesticides will destroy or attack the microbiome. Remember, many of these, at least in agriculture, are meant to destroy microbes. Most of your body, your immune system, your digestive tract, your your pathways of waste are actually managed and kept healthy by bacteria. Even your neurotransmitters, some of your neurotransmitters that control mood, sleep cycle, anxiety, depression, are also controlled by bacteria. So if you're eating things that are killing your microbiome, we've got a health crisis. So feed the microbiome. Pay attention to what you're putting in and make sure that that biome stays healthy, that you can re-inoculate yourself with the bacteria that you need and maintain it through good habits. And then all these things together, hopefully, along with some other things, can help reverse EDC damage, or at least mitigate EDC damage. So let's talk about some of the herbs. So I teach herbal medicine. I'm a clinical herbal therapist. Herbal medicine is my lifelong passion. It looks like I've got 5 minutes to wrap it up. Oops, sorry, Jason. I'll get through this really quickly. So there's some actions that we need to consider: anti-inflammatory, hepatic, hepatoprotective, lymphatic, detoxifying, free radical scavengers, and adaptogenics. So these things bring down inflammation. So remember, inflammation is the body's reaction, the body's response to injury. Hepatic and hepatoprotective, these are things that act on the liver, your main detox organs, or protect your liver. Lymphatic, your lymphatic system is part of your detox system. Free radical scavengers, and adaptogenic. Adaptogen means it helps the body to respond to stress. So these are some of your herbal allies. If you guys want these slides, you can email me. So don't worry about me having to wrap up quickly. Some of the helpful supplements, same types of actions, except also soft tissue healing. CoQ10 is a hugely powerful free radical scavenger. Curcumin and berberine, these are both plant constituents. So curcumin comes from curcuma longa, which is turmeric. Berberine comes from a whole bunch of other berberine-rich herbs. These are highly anti-inflammatory. Also a good, clean daily vitamin to allow the body to do what it needs to do naturally with all those cell-building actions. A B complex, desiccated thyroid if needed. This one will always require testing. Vitamin E, it's a wonderful soft tissue healer. Pro and prebiotics to feed that microbiome. Chlorella helps pull out toxins and heavy metals. Amino acids, and psyllium or flax. So how do I know my EDC status? There are tests that are available. Obviously, they're not standard tests that you can always get through your medical doctor, but these are organic acid testing. There is a GPL tox profile. These are things that you can test your toxic non-metal chemicals. It tests against 173 different environmental pollutants. And the brand new one, I'm so excited that this is here, finally, glyphosate testing. So because it's the world's most widely produced herbicide, this type of testing allows you to see how much glyphosate you potentially have in your system. So if you want to know more, want to talk more, want to yell at me, express your opinion, or talk to me about EDCs, herbal medicine, nutrition, and the environment, here's my contact info. Feel free to reach out. I love speaking with people who are also passionate about health and wellness. Thank you so much for joining. Hopefully that was interesting, not too frightening. And I'm going to turn it back to Elizabeth now. Thank you, everybody, again.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. No, that was fantastic. Very thorough. We're just going to go through some quick questions. So someone's asking, how can we know if local produce is not sprayed with pesticides? So
yeah. So if it's standard agriculture, non-organic, non-biodynamic, it most likely will be sprayed with herbicides and pesticides. You have the right to call your supplier. You just get on the phone and call your farmer and ask him. Oftentimes I go and I find the farmer markets. I will find my local organic farmers or my biodynamic farmers, and I'll buy directly from them. Or there are a few wonderful online food services that deliver your groceries where everything, for as far as produce goes, is certified organic. So just a little bit of research on your part.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think you've inspired us all to reclaim our ancestral health And yeah, loved your solutions at the end. Absolutely. Watch what you're purchasing, watch where your intentions are coming from. So beautiful. We want to thank you so much, Petra. And anyone interested in learning more from Petra, you can find her at Nutrition and the Environment, and also our Herbal Medicine course within our program. And perfect timing for the spring and summer season now. Thank you so much, Petra.
Thank you.